gente? A gente tá live? Ah, a gente tá live. Então, olha só. Eu tô aqui hoje, vou fazer uma palestra. Quer dizer, não sei se eu chamo palestra, painel, conversa, enfim, vai ser um pouquinho de tudo. E vou contar pra vocês um pouco da minha história, de como de advogada eu virei dona de loja e fashion, eu odeio influencer, gente, vocês sabem, eu odeio esse negócio de influencer. Mas enfim, vou contar tudo. Carlinha vai filmar um monte, tá? Beijo.
MBA from Wharton. Early in her career, she was head of corporate strategy and new business development at Estée Lauder. Then she was a managing director at the Carlyle Group, where she invested and was a member of the board of various Carlyle subsidiaries, such as Montclair and Philosophy, LVMH, and also a board of various of subsidiaries of LVMH, such as Donna Karan, Marc Jacobs, Fresh, to name a few. More recently, Pauline taught the business of aesthetics at Harvard, and she hosts a weekly talk show at SiriusXM, where she interviews creative leaders, innovators, and influencers. Nana.
Extend my resume, guys. I'm so sorry.
Your followers put mine to shame.
Come on. No, Nana from Brazil. She graduated from law school in Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah.
But then she decided to go around Brazil teaching scrapbooking. And then she moves to the United States, where she raised a family and juggled creating a group of like-minded women that became her followers. And they follow Nana to these amazing fashion events that she would throw at these luxury retailers that start seeking Nana to promote their brands and take her followers with her. She also a social media, very strong social media presence in Facebook and Instagram, where people follow her daily looks and they start asking her where they could buy her clothes. So she created her online business and actually Private Apple, which named after her group, the Private Apple, which sponsoring those delicious macarons.
Yes.
And it just took off, and it was a great business idea. So so I wanted to start maybe with Pauline. And my question to Pauline: you have a real interest in fashion, and did you make purposeful choices to align those interests with your career? Did it happen by chance? Just tell us a little bit about it.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Pleasure to meet many of you, hopefully more of you, before you meet this way.
Okay.
So the question was, did I start with a passion for fashion, or did I start with the business intention and then sort of fall into it, and was it an accident? I mean, I guess my first response is nothing is by accident, but nor was it necessarily by strategy. You know, when I look back, and it's been almost 30 years since I first graduated from undergraduate, and I was an English major at a liberal arts. If you had asked me back then in the mid-'80s, what am I going to do with my life, I would have said, I have no idea. My mother was an at-home mom of 4 kids and took great pride in that. To this day, she worries when I work too hard that I'm somehow, she doesn't understand that there actually can be satisfaction derived from work. So I had no real direct influences, but the one thing that I always knew is, and I knew this not so much in the work context, but in the life context, that I was very attracted to creative friends from a young age were, you know, not the people who are gunning for a job at Morgan Stanley or at Skadden Arps. It was, you know, where I ultimately worked. I actually worked at both those places at one point or another, but these were the people who were driven by ideas, who had great taste and a sense of style and whimsy and ideas. We were driven by ideas. So that I always knew, but I would say the first 10, 15 years of compartmentalized, where I had the things that I cared about in my private time and the people I would hang with and the books or magazines I would read. And then I had my work, and my work was all about discipline. I did go to the Wharton Business School for that reason. I trained myself to be more analytical. Interest in those 2 sections of my brain.
Very nice. Nana, your story is so different from Pauline, but it's so exciting. So when you create a private Apple group, did you expect to be such a success?
Not at all. I was like, when I created a group, the only thing I was really concerned, it was I have to find a good nail salon in Manhattan. This was my, like, you know, I needed to know. So I was having lunch with some friends, like all brand new at the city with lots of questions, wondering how we're gonna do this, discovering the city. And one of them said, Nana, you should create a group so we can share tips, so we can share some information about the city. And I was like, I know that this kind of group exists, but not in a way that I was comfortable. Like I wanted something more private, more exclusive, more. So then I got home, and in 5 minutes I drove my assistant crazy. She is the one. And I was like, okay, let's create a group, the private Apple, boom, let's do it. And the group actually grew faster than I could ever imagine. And today we are more than 1,000 women, Brazilian women living in New York City, and I have 500 in the waiting list. So yeah, it got like all Brazilian. Guys, I'm so sorry. I'm not. It's not a bully, like nothing like that. But it's, we only speak Portuguese in the group, so it's this kind of thing. So then the brands started to really see this network as a potential clients. So they start to approach me. So Nana, let's do an event. And it was amazing because I love like dealing with, I love people, I love putting together outfits. So I started doing events in Burberry, Carolina Herrera, Versace, Moncler, and Dolce & Gabbana, you know. And it was really cool. Like this was this new group of Brazilians buying in the stores. So, like, one thing led to another, and then people start to reach out to me and say, Nana, I want to advertise in your group. And I was like, oh my God, this is really going to be a business. I don't know if I'm prepared, but okay, let's do this, you know. And then now I have a program of partnership with the group, with so many people, with a chef. This is my private chef, Yoni, and she was the one that did all the macarons. You're gonna taste it, it's amazing. But we have beauty salon, we have interior designers, we have makeup artists, so everybody that was interested in this network. And then I was like, I think I'm not satisfied yet, like the crazy woman. I was like, I'm missing something. I wanted something with my signature. So then I was in Rio, like in vacation, and I was, oh my God, I came across so many new brands, and and the only thing I could think was, wow, this should be selling in New York City. And that's it. The next week, I had a store in my living room. The private Apple is in my living room, guys. Yeah. I live in a 3 floors apartment, and I did the store in the first one. So I really want it. Yeah, I think
that's amazing. Because I actually been to some of your events, and it really feels like a party where people just happen to be shopping. But I think it also fulfills that need that we have to be social and to connect with other people beyond shopping. And then shopping happens, you know, eventually. Eventually, yeah. But people want to connect, so I think that's amazing. I'll go back real quick to Pauline, and then I'll flip back and forth. But Pauline, I'm very intrigued about the last one piece of your bio that you taught the business of aesthetics, and I know that you also are writing a book, and I don't want you to spoil any surprises, but what made you, and what is it about this book? What made you write it?
So as I was coming to the end of my tenure at LVMH, there was one thing that was very clear to me for that next chapter, and this is 2015, entering into 16, and I was so tired of making big companies bigger. I just wanted to take the time to step back and to be, as I put it at the time, more of a thought leader and less of an operational leader. And as those of you who work in big businesses know, when you're in that big business, you just don't have the space or really even the permission to be a thought leader. You're there to drive the business. And so I didn't quite know how that would play out, except late that fall, before I was stepping down, I had a meeting, or actually I had a presentation up at the Harvard Business School, and it was part of a retail symposium. I was a keynote speaker. While I was there, I was somewhat haphazardly introduced to the dean of faculty, and it just was like a light bulb went off that, wow, maybe I should be teaching, like that will give me the space that I need. So I have a meeting with this dean. In the few minutes we had, gave her a little bit of an overview of my background and what I was thinking, and she said, well, would you want to actually be, they have a space for what they call senior practitioners, people who've worked in the real world and who would like to come there for 1 year, 2 years, 3 year period and give of what they've learned. And it immediately felt right. And it was, but the funny thing is, before I even embraced this idea, we sort of said, well, what would I actually teach? And I had to think for that, where do I want to be a thought leader? And at first, the obvious place would have been, well, she's going to teach luxury management. And I thought there's nothing I less wanted to do than teach, like how you build a luxury brand. Well, what about marketing? I had done a lot of marketing over the years. I thought, I don't want to be a functionary. And really, what just sort of blurted out in that moment, I want to teach, this is general management. This is the business of aesthetics. And she said to me, I love it. How do you spell that? So to this day, all these years later, I have to tell people it is spelled with an A. If you ever see it with an E, you tell them they're wrong. And what was important to me about aesthetics is, this is not about luxury. It is not about beauty products around which I've worked or designed. We see good aesthetics in Dyson vacuum cleaners. I think there are good aesthetics, not perfect, but good in Tesla cars. So it's how do executives who are in businesses that aren't trained to bring artistry and experience and delight, consumer human delight into their products, how do they do this? And we've seen, coffee chains transform thanks to Howard Schultz because he brought aesthetics into this idea of buying and consuming premium coffee. So long story short, I taught this in 2016 and 17, was quite surprised at the popularity of the course, and that led the way for me to say there really is a bigger audience for this concept. And so if all goes well, the book would be out next year. And the idea is really not just about how others have done it, but this idea of aesthetic intelligence, which we're all born with. We're born with a lot more aesthetic intelligence than we use. And this is not about making good art. Steve Jobs was never trained in the craft of art. He was, people like to talk about his passion for typography. It's not about that. It's about taste. And it's about having an eye and a vision for what feels good, whether you can execute on it or not, and having the conviction and the articulation to be able, in his case, to have tens of thousands of people who are under him actually deliver on that vision for what to him felt and looked good. So a big part of this book is about how people can, I would say, not just cultivate aesthetic intelligence, but really get back into their own capabilities, which, by the way, I think the school system does away with pretty well. Yeah. So some of what I try to teach people is to undo all that analytic and sort of cognitive development that has numbed them to how they actually feel about things in their bodies. And by the way, the last point I'll make on aesthetics, really, really important, is not design thinking. Visual is a big part of how we live, and it's a big part of what gives us delight. But it's actually an overstimulated sensibility. Whereas when I think about, when you're in a restaurant and the lighting is good, or the acoustics are good, or a good fashion brand, because we are here to talk a bit about fashion, that has, the tactility that we're so missing in fast fashion, that is also a big part of the aesthetic delight.
Thanks for that, Pauline. I find it very interesting because I married an Italian, and we have the worst types of arguments when it comes to buying furniture or clothing because he wants everything top quality. He looks at the stitching. He's not a designer, but he's just Italian.
Yeah, the Italians have very, very high aesthetic intelligence.
And it amazes me. It's just like it's something that you guys have. So, yeah. Nana,
my question was about style for you. How do you? And I love your looks. Like I follow you too, obviously, and I live vicariously through your looks because I don't dare to wear the clothes you wear because I can't. Like I'm a boring financial person. But how do you define your style? How do you came up with that style? And what does it really mean to embrace it and just show it to all your followers without being afraid of being judged? How does that feel?
I think it's amazing. It's a process. Like before social media, I already displayed my style in front of real people, like in life, you know. And I remember one day I was a lawyer, guys. Yes, I was a lawyer. And I was wearing like this purple suit. So, can you imagine like a sea of black suits and I'm with purple? So I went to the judge, so I was talking with the judge, and the guy was like staring at me. And I was, oh my God. And he's not gonna give me what I want, you know, like, and he said to me, I never saw a lawyer with a purple suit. So I'm the first. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm not in the right place. So, but yeah, in the middle of this whole thing, even when I was a teenager, I used to plan my outfits with my mom and have them like tailor-made. I remember this horrible one, a yellow and navy. And it was like this. It was horrible, guys. But I was like, oh my God, I'm so fashioned with 15. And a polka dot one that I made with the shoes like matching. It was horrible, horrible. I was 12. Thank God I don't have pictures because, yeah, we don't need that.
You are a fashion icon already.
No, yeah, I was like, I need to be different. I was like, I need to be different from these people. So when the social media like really took off, for me it was like a natural movement to start sharing my look of the day, to start like giving tips, because my friends were always asking, Nana, can you go with me to the store? Please help me find something for a wedding or something like that. And it was, I'm definitely not shy in terms of styles. I don't know if you'd notice, but
Maybe.
yeah. But I like to experiment. I like to try new things. I like to experiment colors. Even though I'm in the end I said, maybe this is not the best color for me, but I tried, you know. So yes, of course, at some point, like answering the second part of the question, I was afraid of being judged, of being too exposed, or feel that, why, I don't think people get me sometimes, but I'm always about creativity, so creativity is first. And I like to, I don't see price tags or numbers as the main thing. When I put together an outfit, it's like, oh my God, let's play with that. Like you're gonna play with crayons, as my daughters.
But Nana, you're not only putting together an outfit, you're telling a story too.
Yeah, so that's this is always, my husband always said, my husband's over there. Now, he always said that, Nana, you're here to tell your story. You're not here to, like, dress up. It's only a part of it, but I'm here to tell my stories. But once, it was not good this time, guys. I joked because I have this, like, sense of humor that I said everything and people, you know. And then I joked about, oh my God, I need this sunglass to survive. And then I got really bad criticism, like people telling me, you should go to Africa to know what it really means, like. So,
to need something.
To need something. So, yeah, I was devastated because I was like only trying to make a point about the sunglasses, of how I like it, how it was gorgeous, you know.
Did that change how much information you posted, or?
No, not at all.
No, it's just
no.
Okay. Firing away.
No, not at all. Thank God, like this is one case, and I think people really understand that for me, I play with clothes.
Thank God it was also
just
in
like-
Portuguese, right?
Sorry?
Thank God it was also in Portuguese.
Yeah. Like, I really like to play with clothes. For me, it's like food. It's like art. It's like, and I have zero attachment with these pieces. So for me, before a while, I started doing a event at my house that I sell my clothes, and it was fun because people really like go to my house and said, Nana, I want that blue coat you wear in your last London trip. And I'm like, okay. Like, the coat wasn't for sale. But I was like, okay. So I get the coat and I sell it. Because for me, it's selling a piece, it's as happy as buying a piece, you know? Like, if I know that people is going to be really, really happy with that piece, I don't need it. Come on, have it. I'm happy for you. So, yeah, this is me. So, I don't know if I answer your question. But I'm always like talking more than I know, you know.
No, I think I want to get into some questions that are more like your opinion about current topics or your perspective. So I obviously we are in the digital era, and the way people shop, dress, define their styles is changing because of digital. So I wanted to get your views on that. Both of you, perhaps first, Pauline.
So, this is sort of a tale of two cities. On the one hand, as I mentioned before, we're so hyper-stimulated visually. And it's not just that we over-exercise our eyes and arguably under-exercise, our sense of feel or smell. But it's that even our visual abilities are lacking depth, because for every hour you spend on a screen, you're looking at something sort of in this two-dimensional zone. And and I worry for the next generation, by the way, that doesn't even have, the decades that I have of having actually seen things in 3D for those many hours. So the way it's that piece of it is affecting us is, number one, we're very responsive to that which is high contrast, quick colors, but also a certain disposable, and I think the sensitivity around buying things that are made to last, or the appreciation for things that are made to last, is much lower than it would have been a generation ago. And we see that, by the way, among millennials and their willingness to even rent clothes with in mind, if I'm going to post, because everything that they buy is basically with a post in mind, why would I ever want to be seen having worn that twice? So it makes sense, if your motivation is to post, to not actually own something. The other, though, side of that coin is, at the end of the day, we're still human. Even people like my daughter, my little one, who's 13, who doesn't know life before the iPad, she's still human before she's a digital user. And humans have certain needs that when they go for any periods of time under met or unsatisfied, tend to compensate in the other extreme. So the other trend that I'm seeing, which hasn't yet manifested itself to the extent that people are talking about in this sort of tuning out or getting off the grid for any period of time, but it's this hyper appreciation for that which you cannot either buy online, or which is not easy to make, or which has a sort of intrinsic value. And I even see it if you look at a lot of the clothing that's being featured at the couture shows, not as much in the contemporary shows. It has a lot of volume. And there's a lot of combining of textures, things that have leather and embroidery and, other materials, even artificial like plastics, clear plastics that you would not have historically used in a fashion show. And I think that some of that is that people actually want things that almost, if you can't touch it, it gives you sort of a sense of imagination of being able to touch it and the tactility that comes with that. So I think the short answer to your question is it's still playing itself out, and I don't look at anything that's happening here and now as necessarily indicative of where we might be heading in another 5 or 10 years, because there's a lot of contradicting trends as well in reaction to this digital movement, which is indisputably powerful.
Nana.
Yeah, for me, I as a consumer point of view, standpoint, digital has changed everything. because now the information is more accessible. Like you can research, you know about the product. So when in the past, when you used to go to a store, the salesperson was the person that knows about the product, and he was like the one that telling you. Nowadays, you can do this by yourself. You don't need a salesperson. So when you got to the store, you know already what you want, how it's made, and so this makes the retail has to invest in new experience for the consumer, new personalizing service, so people are like willing to go to the store. So for me, this is really changing the way people buy, and I feel like the other thing I really see is like opinions now carry more weight than ever. Like you have reviews of everything. So if you wanna buy a product, and you in the past, if your neighbor buys something and he was not like happy, you probably would never know, or even you would know if he would met him. Now you can go online and see like people are like, no, this is not good because of that or that. So you have much more information. You have like real-time feedback of the products. So this is, for me, it's really changing too. And the other thing I feel like it's really important, that getting to know your customer is easier, much more easier. You have social media, so people are putting your lives in Instagram and Facebook, so you can totally see how is your consumer, what he's looking for. So it's easier to predict or to get to know and prepare for it. So I think social media, it's changing everything, and it's only the beginning. It's going to be really, really big, like, in shorter time.
It's amazing that he's telling you the ads and also the analytics, right?
Yeah, you can see, like,
money everywhere.
Everybody, what are you clicking, what do you like it, what posts are doing better than the others, so...
Those are great viewpoints. What I would like to know to do, instead of like continuing my questions, since the invitation said it's a conversation, I want to open up and see if you either have a viewpoint or a question for our guest, and I'll take the mic. Kari.
I talk very loudly. Okay. So I love what you said, Pauline. You're clearly tactile, wearing tactile, right? Beautiful. Could you share with us your book working title? Because I love aesthetic intelligence, because we're talking about AI all the time. It's all we hear about, digital, artificial intelligence, and you're talking about aesthetic intelligence. Then you're claiming we're born with it, or there's, can you tell us a little bit more?
Which I call very conveniently the other AI. So the working title, and of course, for anyone who's ever seen the publishing process at work, we'll probably go through many more iterations, is the aesthetic advantage. And it's geared toward business people, but I think there'll be applications even for people in non-business environments like hospitals. I would love to see people at the airlines apply some aesthetic intelligence.
Right?
God. So the point being really that we've moved into this era where not only do we not need more stuff, I mean, this is probably the first time these last few decades in human history where in developed countries, the poorer you are, the more likely you're heavy, you're overweight. We don't need stuff, food, everything is cheap. Our needs are basically met very cheaply. We have other issues that we have to contend with, but if anything, what we're looking for is a quality of life, and this does apply to this sort of new generation of luxury. Luxury is not just about a badge or wearing a logo or showing that you're rich. It's about getting things that money actually can't buy, which is time, which is education. I always say, America's most luxurious brand is Harvard University, because first of all, it's very expensive. Second of all, hard to get into, so there's a scarcity value. Third of all, has a real heritage that goes back, over 200 years, which you can't make up. Then you have the idea that you could actually triple that god-awful
tuition, and they'd still fill the class many times over. So the demand is so. So my point being that luxuries really go in this new era about rich experiences, about escaping, about entertaining. It's not about possessing. And so then I say, if I'm in business, even if I'm in vacuum manufacturing, just to be able to produce a little more cheaply, as the Industrial Revolution taught us to do so well, and more recent techniques like Six Sigma and so forth, that's a race to the bottom, because there'll be someone else in time who can do that even more cheaply and even more quickly. And so the one thing that you can own and that people will still pay for is delight. If you can deliver delight, and delight, by the way, is not, I mean, I just did a session down in Florida for the luxury division of Marriott. They have Ritz-Carlton and St. Regis and so forth. And when I hear them talk about luxury, they talk about service. And they'll say, we want to know the customer's name when they check in. We want to make sure that the navigation from the front desk to the room is seamless. And I say, well, I would hope that Motel 6 does that too. It's not that hard with big data to offer good service. In fact, it's getting cheaper and cheaper. What really they can do at a $600 a night rate structure versus Motel 6 at probably $70 or $120 a night is they can provide elements of design and of surprise. I mean, sometimes customers research doesn't help you get anywhere, because if you answer exactly what people expect, you're not giving them real delight. You're giving them exactly what they would expect, and anything less than that is a complaint. Yeah. So that's another big point that I make, is about how do you infuse this sense of pleasure that goes well above just good service.
Any other interesting questions?
I got a question. I don't know if it's interesting. I hope it is. How do you measure aesthetic? How do you come to the conclusion that you are intelligent or you're not, or how much more you need?
Well, first of all, I think it's a dangerous question, and it is an interesting one, because we live in this world where measurements are flat, and they tend to be very short-sighted. So in public companies, and I sit on the board now of two of them, there's a lot of pressure to reach those performance metrics each quarter. And if you're not a disciplined CEO, there's a lot of things you can do to reach those numbers that are not in the best interest of the shareholders. And so the first thing I say is, and we have to get more comfortable that there are measures that, may be a bit messy. So one of the measures, I'll actually give you a case study, okay? So about 20 plus years ago, just as, the notion of interconnectivity was coming about, this scrappy entrepreneur starts Craigslist. And Craigslist does a lot of things. It basically was taking the listings, all the ads from newspapers, and saying, why would I pay on the newspaper if I can put it, basically slap it on a page on an internet? And one of the big sections, which was always fairly prominently featured on Craigslist, was home rentals, right? And anyone who would use that either was so desperate because they couldn't afford a hotel, not even Motel 6, or they didn't value their life, because it's kind of scary to stay in a stranger's home in that format and the way it was presented. So flash forward 15 years later, because it's still a very young company, and you have Airbnb come about. Airbnb does not have the benefit that Craigslist had of being first entrant. It didn't come with great sophistication. The two founders are actually graduates of the Rhode Island School of Design. One of them, Joe Gebbia, gave a TED Talk called Designing for Trust. And the breakthrough that they made is that they created a visual and a sensorial experience as you kind of navigated through their site that infused trust into the process, which kind of broke the code. It sort of broke the case, I'd say the impediment to why people wouldn't have done that before. Now you have on Airbnb $10,000 a night homes that will be rented, and by the way, preferred to many of the premium locations that Ritz or other high-end places might offer. So, and by the way, Craigslist is valued today, with the short history, has probably 30x the valuation of a Craigslist. Airbnb is over 30 billion valuation, and Craigslist is still around, but it's a fraction. Maybe it's between 1 and 2 billion, I'm going to guess. So my only point is that there's real value being created, in ways that often in the short term that we demand don't have very clear measures. And the way, if I were an investor at Airbnb, which I wasn't, unfortunately, in that first year, I would have looked at engagement, I would have looked at repeat, I would have looked at NPS scores, which is essentially people who are willing to kind of vouch and endorse for you. And some of those take a while to actually translate into revenue, into bottom line. But as we know, even from Amazon and on the other side of the spectrum, that in the long term, they're indomitable because they were disciplined and because they knew what they were working toward, even if it was going to take a really long time.
I had another question, but I'm not going to.
I have a question. So,
question to both ladies. I'm very much engaged by your comments. Pauline, you're talking about luxury. I see many people from the next generation talking about impact, accountability. So you look at a hotel like Six Senses, which is luxury, but very much focused on the environment. What are you seeing in those trends that are going that you could share with us? And Nana, you said that there are items in Brazil you think should be up here. Are any of the items or products that you see going back and generating an impact in Brazil in either empowering women, providing them with an education, or some type of sustainability to create an awareness up here for an impact in sustaining down there?
When you start.
Yeah, like even in my store, I have like a beachwear, a swimwear line, and the fabric, it's biodegradable. That's it, guys. So yeah, I saw so many lines in Brazil that has this thing in mind because
Marta Medeiros.
Yeah, so the Amy Beachwear is the one brand I have that there's this kind of technology. Marta Medeiros is another brand that does like all the embroidery. It's made by artisans from interior of like northwest from Brazil. So it's really like empowering people that lives in a place that they don't have water sometimes, they don't have anything to do, but they have their hands and they have their work. So that makes them feel important or feel I'm valued something, you know, and they do a great job. So I think we are in this moment in Brazil and in America, or to give power to women to be able to see that there's a future, like you can do better. There's one project in Sergipe, and Lara is here because she's one of the founders, it's not the name, but CEO or whatever. And they do this, like they bring technology to interior de Sergipe. Sergipe, it's like a really, really poor place in Brazil. So you teach these kids how to sketch, to draw. You teach like how to do an app, and they start to see like perspective. They start to see that, wow, I can do much more than I'm used to. My father is a fisherman, and I thought this is the only thing I could do. So now I can see myself like going far and being this person that creative and no limits. So yeah, I think in Brazil this is really, really important right now.
Yeah, so I would say on your question of the role of impact in luxury, to me, first of all, that's not luxury specific. I don't think any consumer business, maybe even a non-consumer business, can get away with not being concerned with its role and its mission in this environment. Where I've seen there be pretty dramatic shift, first of all, when I started at Estee Lauder, this would have been over 20 years ago, we had, well, we didn't call it that, but other people would have, our CSR group, Corporate Social Responsibility. And it was like this sidearm, and you sort of take a, in a multi-billion-dollar company, maybe a few millions, maybe a few tens of millions, and it was like a side activity, and it was a goodwill gesture. And it made employees feel a bit good, and they'd probably find one or two causes. Maybe it was breast cancer that were closer to home, and others that were just part of being a good citizen. That doesn't work anymore, to me. That, to me, is just the cost of entry. Everyone should be doing something just to be part of a community. Where I see well, first of all, let me say, good philanthropy should never be strategic. It should be a value. And it should be done with a sense of purpose that goes beyond pleasing some shareholder or constituent. I get excited, and these are not newer businesses, but they still are in a league of very few, but with propositions like Patagonia that does what they do because there's no other way to be in that Patagonia environment. I think Tom's Shoes started on that path as well. Probably didn't have as much dimension to it, but it was clear and it was ownable and it was consistent in terms of how they were applying those values. So I'd like to see, and I think the winning companies over time are going to be on those kind of tracks, where it's not, this is not about PR, it's not about appeasing an audience, it's really about creating an environment that your employees are proud to work for, that sets a culture that is something that both your customer, employees, and partners can buy into. And then the last part, which is probably where most companies fall flat, but we're still in the early stages, is owning something. So when I see a company that says we're all about the environment, and usually it's something like Exxon, which is a bit of a joke, but let's just say it's a company that really, like an Origins or a Veda, I'm about the environment. I say, but you can't solve for the environment. That's just too big. So be about, my husband, who, and this is a very micro example, but he started a foundation around the waters of Long Island, and by the way, partnered with a division of InBev that has a craft brewery on Long Island that, much in that original Paul Newman salad dressing example, gives the proceeds to that body of water. And that you can solve. So my advice to business people is whether, in his case, it's a tiny effort, but it's a tiny body of water. If you're a big company, you can still do something, but do something that you can own and you can actually solve for. That's really where impact comes in. It's not just the mission.
I have a question for both of you, actually. How would you define leadership, and what kind of advice would you give to women that are trying, to reinvent themselves, like you both did at one point? You had an English background, Nana was a lawyer, so what would be your advice for someone that is trying to reinvent herself?
For me, it's all about doing what you love. Like, when I was a lawyer, it wasn't for me. It wasn't, my eyes weren't sparkling. I was like, oh my God, I have to do this, I have to talk to this guy, oh my God. So it wasn't like, and so the first thing I did when I got to America, we were transferred because of my husband's work. I said, no, now I'm going to do something that I really love. And fashion, it was always my thing. I was always visual. I was always like this person that wants to know what is trend or what is going on. So for me, the passion about it, and don't be afraid of not being successful in the beginning. You're never going to be. Like, I do so many mistakes until now, and I learn every single day. I'm like, oh my God, this wasn't a good idea. Let's try again, and again, and again. And sometime, eventually, you're gonna make it. So, for me, it's like, don't hold it back, and do what you love.
So I agree, and I would also add, much like I said, philanthropy shouldn't be a business strategy. It should be a set of values that may be a strategic benefit. Leadership is not a career strategy. Leadership is living what you believe and living with conviction and with a certain fearlessness. I think it's particularly important for women also to live as integrated a life as possible. So, mentioned that when I started my career, I assumed that if it was something I enjoyed, it would be on the side, and if it was something that was good for me, sort of like eating your vegetables and you get dessert. And there's no way your vegetables should taste good. I went to Wharton thinking I would hate it, and it was a bit of a revelation that I actually quite enjoyed the experience. Not every part of it, but so I would say the more fully you can kind of embrace what you're doing and infuse personal interest into it. And there are a lot of things that I forego, not because they wouldn't be lucrative or good in terms of bragging rights. So it's because I don't want to be around those people. Like, I want to be with people I genuinely enjoy, and I pick environments, and I'm willing to live with those trade-offs. So I would say, going back, it's being clear about who you are, about what you enjoy, about immersing yourself in environments, knowing that you still have to have the discipline and the techniques to create value around that. On your question about transitioning, I'm still transitioning. I mean, you mentioned the first of a never-ending cycle of transitions. What gave me the right to become a professor? And now I'm on a radio show. I've never done radio before. And, I think about this famous line. There's a great documentary. It actually won the Oscar probably 15 years ago called Fog of War. And it was about Robert McNamara, who served as the Secretary of Defense under Kennedy. And he knew him. I think they went to Harvard together. And he had, before that appointment, had always worked in the world of business, actually been the CEO of Ford Motor. And when Jack Kennedy won the election, he appointed his friends to cabinet positions. And McNamara says, now reflecting back at close to 90 years old, that he said, I don't know if I can take this job. I've never done anything like this. And Kennedy turned to him and said, you think I've ever done anything like this? He had never been a president before he was the president. So I would just say, don't think about, women often think that, there's so much, I have to be ready and prepare and give up perfection, because it's definitely elusive.
Even when we decide to get pregnant, we are always like, no, I'm not ready.
Yeah, you're not ready until you have to be. So, and you don't have to figure it all out. Just you have to get through the day.
Yeah. I'll ask a question if no more questions, and then we can go back to, so we have
last
questions.
one.
Then after that, we can go back to networking.
I mean, you're both great. Just from a business point of view, what's going to happen to retail stores? Because we see like all the streets empty, big department stores. How do you think fashion is going to change? How do you think?
Does everybody hear the question? No. So Michelle just asked, what are their perspectives on the retail stores, brick and mortar stores? If you think those are going to close down, continue to close down?
Right. So I would say, first of all, there was a piece on the cover of the Journal several days ago. It was an interview of Les Wexner, who basically was predicting the demise of the smartphone and the resurgence of the mall. I totally disagree. But I think that the one thing he said is, and by the way, no surprise, the man is in his 80s. He's still living in a very different era. But the one thing I will say he got right is that people want to be around people. And there are certain fundamental human experiences that the web or any technology cannot fulfill. My opinion is we have not saturated our shift to online, but I do not envision a time in my life or in my grandkids' life where stores don't exist. I do envision a time where department stores and malls don't exist, but that's not stores. And the winners are really creating new store environments, and there are interesting examples. I see it in every city I go to, more outside of New York, because New York is so freaking expensive that the retailers don't take chances. But when I was just in Miami, and I went in, there's a store where you actually go up into a parking lot, and it's about 6 floors above, and it's again got that element of surprise, interesting curation. I do think women especially when it comes to fashion, still want the eye of an editor, whether she's a merchant or a storekeeper. But we're going to have to be a lot less greedy, frankly, in order for those stores to, and more like, almost like theater directors. We have to think of it as a theater. And people, by the way, when the movies came out, Broadway didn't go under. In fact, tickets have never been more expensive. It doesn't compete with movies, and it shouldn't.
Yeah, for me, if you think like the process when you go to Bloomingdale's or Saks, first of all, you got lost. You can say, where can I find like a specific thing? Then you have to walk until you get to the right place. Then you have to find someone to help you. So if you think the process is so trouble, like it's not easy. So I think they will have to reinvent themselves and to start to bring people again, because online shopping is so much faster, and you can return if you don't like it, so it's not like a big deal. You can buy 2 sizes of your shoes. Oh, this is my size. Okay, then I'm going to return the other one. So you have to compete with that, with practical things, like, and you don't have time anymore to waste to try to find the floor and then try to find the exactly place and then try to find a person to help you. This is so much trouble. It's not worth it. So they will have to reinvent something. Put like
the private Apple,
like I tried to do at the private Apple.
So Nana, how do you think they would reinvent themselves? Will retailers still be anchors when you have a project like Hudson Yards? Will the retailers be anchors in a multi-million-dollar, largest multi-use project in America today, or no? Like, how would they reinvent themselves in that kind of environment?
Yeah, I think they have to like bring new experience, because you only bring people to stores right now if you offer something. It's not anymore like about, oh no, I'm gonna go to the store and I'm gonna see the product and then maybe I get a bottle of water. No, you have to like make things like spectacular. And so now you have to come and we're going, and I do this all the time in the stores. I do events, and we do like this major brunch with DJ, yeah, it's getting crazy, but this is what works, because people are not like, I'm not going if there's something special. I'm gonna leave this place like feeling that I learned something, or that I live to tell. So they have to start doing this, and I still think that the huge like stores, they will die. I don't know. Of course, it's like too dramatic. I'm a dramatic person, so sorry. But but I feel I really feel that the small stores with this really special curation, and they have more time. They have like more time to survive, other than the big things.
Okay. No, and I think just I'm not I guess here, but just to complete, I think there are a lot of stores now that ship to your home for free, and they structure in a way that you don't pay city tax or what have you, so you can keep shopping without carrying bags.
Yeah, and your husband is not seeing, so you're like, please, can you like deliver at night, or can you deliver between town and so your husband never knows. This is perfect. Like Nana Pauline, they deliver the same day. It's like, it's an addiction. When you get the email and say, oh my God, what? So.
But even the fact that Amazon now has a store where you go browse books and touch and see, and then you buy online. So I think brick and mortar may stay around, just has to, I don't know.
Reinvent themselves.
I we could go for hours and hours here, because they were so amazing, and I'm sure we all have questions, but maybe you're all thirsty and you want to eat something and talk and go to the bathroom.
Just the last one.
So
you have an invitation to make.
So yeah, if you have any announcements.
Just one more thing, guys. So tomorrow and
Wednesday
I'm doing 2 events at the store, and it would be a pleasure having you guys over there. It's going to be a talk. Tomorrow it's going to be a talk about self-esteem and self-acceptance and self-love, and let's be our own Valentines, like we don't have to wait for months. No. And on Wednesday, it's going to be more like a coach, like goals for your new year and how to achieve them. So yeah, it's going to be fun. So I try to do this all the time. Like I have the store, but I have to bring some special content for the people that visit me. So
If you
If you guys can go, I'll be.
just talk to me.
Just talk. Yeah.
Yes, talk to me. I can get their names.
She's the crazy assistant that I drive crazy all the time.
Okay. So anyone has anything to say before we go have some more drinks?
Thank you.
So let's take